Hi and welcome to another Retronaut video. So why am I recording this video? Well, actually it's December the 30th, just one day before obviously New Year's Eve. So I hope you've all been having a good Christmas if that's what you celebrate. And I'll definitely wish you a happy new year. I hope it's going to be good for you, everybody out there. I'm certainly looking forward to making use of the cabin, and this is actually quite a momentous video actually, because this is the first actual video that I'm recording from the cabin. And it's actually a bit of an unusual one because it doesn't really have a strong topic, except for maybe about hubris. So why hubris? Well, a couple of months ago, like many people, I was watching the new Fallout series on Amazon Prime, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't know if you know, but I'm a big fan of Fallout, love the games. I wish Bethesda would actually get on with it and actually make a new one, not in 10 years' time. But anyway, in the meantime, we all had the Fallout series. And if you have Amazon Prime, you will have watched it and you would have known how good it was. And it made me think about you know, the history of Fallout. And I have actually previously played Fallout 1. In fact, I actually, that was one of the games that I sought out once I got myself a retro PC, bought a compact laptop a couple of years ago, and during the depths of COVID, I think it was, and got a hold of Fallout. I've actually bought a copy of it, and I played the original game. Got 90% of the way through and didn't actually finish it. But anyway, that's by the by. And I was watching the TV series and I thought to myself, I wonder if that's actually like, you know, the beginning of the game. So I actually did a bit of a deep dive into Fallout, bought an artwork book, read up on the history of it. And I came to the realization that it actually wasn't the first game in the series. The first game in the Fallout series, sort of, is a game called Wasteland. And this is a game which I didn't know about. It's interesting because it actually fell between two stools for me. I was a Commodore 64 user up until, I think it was 1987 when I bought my Amiga 500. And up until that point, I had a really big collection of Commodore 64 games, both bought and not so bought, let's put it that way. But I was a big purchaser of games. I did actually buy as much as stuff as I could afford. That was my policy. I would always buy every game that I could actually afford to do, to have the budget for. And yeah, as I said, in 1987, I sold my Commodore 64 very sadly, but at the same time, very excitedly to get my Amiga 500, and that's a whole different story. And like many people out there, I went on to become a huge Amiga fan. But one of the downsides of that was that I left the Commodore 64 scene at that point. And I mean absolutely left it, because I didn't have a machine anymore. I had to sell it to get my Amiga 500. I think I sold it for the best part of 500. Now, £500, I should say. And that's quite a lot. And the reason for that is I had a lot of games bought. As I said, I had a printer, my Commodore 64, my 1541 disk drive, etc., etc. So when I actually sold the machine, I got a really good price for it. But it was gone now. And what happened was a company called Interplay, who I actually was a big fan of, although not really consciously, but I really loved The Bard's Tale. It's actually up there on the shelf. I'm not sure if it's in camera shot. I've got a copy of The Bard's Tale. Loved The Bard's Tale. Well, it turns out a few years later, from what I understand, Interplay actually used the engine for The Bard's Tale to make a post-apocalyptic game where you roam the wasteland with your band of intrepid adventurers, and you can actually see that here on the artwork on the box, which I think is really cool. And Interplay really loved the game. They were very happy with it. The publisher was Electronic Arts. I don't know if you can see the logo there. So the publisher actually paid, funded the game, and obviously the Interplay developers made the game. A couple of years later, they wanted to do a sequel, and Electronic Arts was being a bit nefarious at that point, and they said no, which is a bit weird really, but they said they wanted to do a sequel to Wasteland. So Interplay asked again, it's our product, basically, it's our IP. We'd really like to do a sequel to it. And again, EA said no. So that put them in a pickle. And what they actually did was they then decided to pivot and make a new game, which went on to become Fallout. So you can see that, in a way, Wasteland is actually part of the Fallout series. It's just that officially it couldn't actually be called that. And in fact, if EA had actually played along, Fallout would never have existed, which is interesting. And we might have all watched the Wasteland series instead of Fallout. So anyway, a couple of months ago, I was waiting for a copy of this to come up on eBay at a reasonable price. And this copy came up, and I must admit, I'm really happy with it. It's in very good condition. Whoever owned it kept it in very good shape. It's actually got the original play discs there. And then it's got the manual inside it, the clue book. Well, the clue book advert anyway. There's the original system discs. And what's really nice about it is that it came in one of the EA, which I thought they'd stopped doing by this point. It came in a sort of album cover, like a vinyl LP, which I'm a big fan of as well. And I've actually collected some of the games, again, some of which you might see behind me. And I was really curious about playing this game. Now, what happened then was the cabin interjected. I spent several months building the cabin. Well, not personally. If you'll have watched the videos which I'm releasing at the moment, chronicling the building of the cabin, you would have seen hopefully the episode on building the foundation, which doesn't sound particularly interesting, but it is literally the foundation of the cabin. So I felt that the project really couldn't go ahead without showing that process, which was quite involved actually. And then more interestingly, maybe the actual building of the cabin. But because of the way things turned out, I had to do a lot of work myself. And then I also had to build a shed behind the cabin to replace the shed I had to demolish to build the cabin. So basically months went by where I was working on that and getting the cabin up to the point where I could actually use it for what it was intended for, which is to be a home office and retro space and a YouTube studio as well. So yeah, that brings us to today. So this is my Commodore 128D. It's never been seen on the channel as far as I'm aware. And I've had it for about 2 years. A couple of years ago when I got it, I did actually open it up like you do when you're a retro person. And the reason for that was because it has a fan in it, and the fan is notoriously very noisy. So what I decided to do was buy a Noctua fan of the right size, open it up, give it a service, and then replace the fan with a new one, and then basically put it back together. Very light touch, really. Now, subsequently, I've realized that maybe I should have done another thing to it as well, which is a mod that you can make to these, which allows you to change the internal disk drive to be disk drive 8 instead of 9. And the reason why you should do that, if I just grab this over here, is that I have an SD2 to IEC device, which you may know is a kind of pseudo floppy drive emulator, I suppose, for the Commodore 64 and Commodore 128. And I have used this on my Commodore 64, very happy with it. And I thought it would probably make sense to try and get images of Wasteland and then try and play it on this. Now, I set myself a goal, actually, something to motivate myself, which is that by the end of the year, which is literally tomorrow, I would actually play Wasteland, I should say. Yeah, slip of the tongue there, but you see how it goes. Yeah, I would play Fallout 0, aka Wasteland. And I was quite excited about that. It's a small thing, but what was the point of building this cabin if it wasn't to actually enjoy my machines? That's exactly why I built it. Up until now, I've had this issue where I do a video, I get a machine out, I do some work on it. Sometimes I do it off camera. I was working on my dining room table in my house, do some repair work, and then eventually, I'd appear in front of camera, and then I would show you what I'm doing with the machine, etc., etc. And once that was done, the machines then had to go away And it was a pain because it was just this sort of conveyor belt of doing videos, getting machines out, putting them away. And I could never just, on the whim of a moment, just go over to a machine and start using it. And now I can do that in the cabin. And that's exactly what I've done today. I've got my Commodore 128D. It was actually sitting here since I did the basic layout of the cabin. It's not necessarily going to be here in the long run. And my thinking was, because I do have, let me get this. I do have my original, well, not my original, but my original Commodore machine, a Commodore 64. And it's in great condition. I actually did make a dog's breakfast, so the original case. I retro-brighted it, and I actually did it too much. And I ended up with a kind of weird mustache here where the reinforcement plastic here actually sort of became visible through the plastic. I don't know if anybody else has had that experience. It just looked really odd. The case color came out looking pretty good, actually, but just with this white patch here, like a sort of little white patch going like this, and it looked like a little blonde mustache. It looked really bizarre. Luckily, somebody was actually selling just this case on eBay, and it was quite cheap. I think it was £15, something like that. So I bought that very quickly and swapped it in. Exactly the same case as my original one, except obviously not damaged. Anyway, I was thinking, do I put my Commodore 64 out? Because this was, one of my big loves really in retro computing, the Commodore 64. Or do I put out the Commodore 128? The Commodore 128 is not a machine that I had back in the day. But it does have the advantage of being, a Commodore 128 and a 64 at the same time. Obviously, you can type in Go 64 and it'll change into a Commodore 64, which is amazing. And it also has a built-in disk drive, and I've actually bought an external drive for it as well. Not sure if I'll ever get to use this. But the problem was, I couldn't really justify having my Commodore 64 out. So I decided I would actually try and play Wasteland on the Commodore 128D. Now you can see I've got my 1084S monitor as well. It's been months since I've used the monitor, and it's been years since I've actually used this machine. So you never know what's going to happen. And I got it all set up, turned on the machine. Actually, I use this monitor here, which is another donation donation to the channel by my mother. It's another old monitor, or rather TV, which I found in her house, but it actually has SCART on it and composite and VGA. So it's actually a really good retro monitor, but not really that useful as a TV anymore, not in basically 2025, right? So I tried it, and I must admit with the SCART lead, it wasn't very good, lots of interference, and I just thought, I'm sure the picture's better than that. I remember it being actually quite good on the 128D. So I got out my my Luma and Chroma lead and swapped that in and plugged it in and turned it on. And there was the Commodore 128 green screen instead of the blue screen. And I must admit, it looked really, really good. Needed a little bit of fiddling around just to get it, dialed in. What it's like with these monitors. The color wasn't quite right, and the brightness wasn't quite right. So anyway, I popped down the flap, and I was doing horizontal adjustment, and the picture disappeared. And I thought, well, that's really weird. How can that have actually broken? Well, the monitor. I thought, well, the monitor's obviously died. Something's happened to the monitor. So it was still lit up, but there was no picture at all. And so I powered down the 128D, fiddled with the cables on it, turned it back on, still no picture. Very weird. And then after about 3 or 4 times trying this, the penny dropped, and I realized that the power light actually wasn't on. That was a bit of a shocker. So I waited for a bit. Actually what I did was, I think I moved the monitor over there, and I was actually going to, I think, swap in the Commodore 64 and give that a try instead. And I gave it a try one last time and actually came back on. So I thought, okay, I know what's happened. The power cable has probably got loose on the back. So I went to the back and I adjusted the kettle lead as it plugs into the back of the machine. Don't forget, this machine has a built-in power supply. which I guess is a blessing and a curse, probably mostly a curse actually, because it obviously adds so much more heat into the machine. So I fiddled with the cable on the back, turned it back on, light lit up. It was unplugged from the monitor. So I thought, okay, being a little bit hasty here, it was just a loose cable. I'll put it back on, I'll put the monitor back. So I got the monitor from over here and put it back, plugged it back in, turned the machine on, working great again. So I thought, okay, fantastic. I just thought it was such a sad trombone moment that after months of working on the cabin, my goal of playing Wasteland before the end of the year is not going to happen. But now I realized that the machine was actually working fine and I would be able to crack on with it. So I was quite excited again. And I typed in Go 64. It changed into Commodore 64 mode and I was just fiddling with the colors. And again, the monitor went off. And this time I didn't worry about the monitor. I knew that it was the power supply of this machine because I looked at the power supply here and it was off again. So at this point, something also chimed in. When I actually first turned on the machine, there was a smell of what you would call electronics. If you know what I mean by that. When you get electronic failure, you get that kind of strange smell. But the thing was, it was just that smell, and it was very, very mild. I wasn't smelling a lot of it. It wasn't like there was like smoke or anything like that coming out of the machine. It was just a very mild smell of electronics, capacitors or whatever it is. And at this point, I thought to myself, okay, so maybe that shows that there's a failure, which is starting to happen in the machine. And I turned the machine off again, waited for a while, turned it back on, and it did come back on again. And it did the same thing again, went off after about a minute. So since then, I've not turned the machine back on. And I decided that, let's just get my Commodore 64 so I can play Wasteland. So I got my Commodore 64 down, which was in its original box, popped it on here, put the monitor behind it, turned it on, and absolutely no picture at all. And I thought to myself, well, that's okay because I've probably done it wrong. I checked the cable in the video socket, that looked fine. I thought to myself, maybe the Commodore 64 outputs video in a different way, which I don't think it does. The cable actually says C64 and 128 on it, not just 128. So I thought, okay, it's a universal cable for both machines. Then I realized that the power light was looking a little bit weak and I thought that was a bit strange. So I turned the machine off and it's actually got a very sort of dodgy switch, which is kind of stuck. It feels like it's stuck all the time. So I turned it off and then I turned it back on again. And it was quite bright for a second, the LED, and then basically the power supply went off again. So I just thought I'd share that with people. That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. You've got all these machines and all the will in the world. They look great, but at the end of the day, they are old machines and they will have a tendency to break. And a lot of these machines have been through quite a lot of mechanical stress recently because they've been moved from my house into the cabin, obviously carried carefully. I was careful with all the machines. But at first they couldn't go onto the tables because there weren't any tables in here. I had to make the tables. Obviously, as I was making the tables, I was then moving them around to make room. There was a bit of sort of retro musical chairs going on. And it's actually taken until today where I actually was in a point where I was able to actually do this. And neither my Commodore 64 or my Commodore 128D work. I don't mind, it's okay. It's one of those things that happens. I'll wait to play this, it's fine. Next year will be just as good to play this. It was actually really good because, if it wasn't for these machines pooping out, I would have been able to play the game and I would have been able to reach my goal. But there we are. That's the way it is. So what am I going to do now? Well, I'm not sure if I've got time to fix these machines immediately. I would like to because I'd like to really play Wasteland. I got these machines to actually use them, and using them for me is playing games and other software, exploring, sometimes applications, not just games. I will be doing that with my Silicon Graphics machine, hopefully. I'll be able to actually show you how you use Silicon Graphics software to do 3D graphics, because that's something I used to do in my job for many years. Obviously, it will take a little bit of time to train myself up on that, but it shouldn't be too difficult, because it's probably going to be simpler, not necessarily that easy to use, but simpler than the software that I used when I stopped working in the industry. But, you know, the 128D does need more work doing on it anyway. And I was thinking about that today. The problem with the SD2 to IEC is that it only works, as far as I'm aware. I think, actually, no, maybe not. With the dip switches on the back, you can probably configure it to be drive 9 or drive 8, I'm assuming. That's not really the problem. The problem is that the internal disk drive on the 128D, unfortunately, Commodore didn't think about the fact that sometimes you may not want that to be drive 8. Now, the problem is many games, many pieces of software that came for the C64 and 128 were basically hard-coded to work only from drive 8. Drive 9 was generally used as the drive that you would save your data to, your games, or whatever application you were using. And that means that if you're going to run software from this device, it really makes a lot of sense that you can actually change this internal drive into drive 9. So it can basically become the secondary drive that you save data to. So you can pop a floppy disk in there and save your Wasteland progress as you play the game. So I've seen people doing mods of these machines, and generally what they do is, quite a lot of people, they drill a hole in the side, put a switch there, and then there's a place on the motherboard, there's a jumper that you can connect to, which will then switch between the internal drive being drive 8 or drive 9. Ironically, Commodore did actually put a jumper on the board, but they didn't connect it to anything externally. So you do have the ability to make that mod yourself. They just didn't do it for you. So that's something I definitely want to do with this machine. And I think really to play Wasteland without using the original discs, which are very old now, right? This game would have come out in, when was it? Something like 1989 or something like that. I don't know. I'll put the date up on the screen. It's ancient, and these floppy disks, they may work at first, but they're quite likely to fail. Luckily, these discs in here, whoever was playing this, it was very common back in the day not to actually use the original discs, obviously, because you don't want to destroy your game by saving onto your original discs. So they've actually used Maxell, which is a nice brand of floppy disks, and they've made them, copies of the original game, which are in here to then play with. So I can try that. That's what I was going to do today. I was going to pop the disc in. I'd actually put the disc in the drive. And I was just in the process of going, go 64, let's load up the game and see what happens, when the machine just turned off. And I had my little sort of retro slap to the face. A little sort of dose of reality. So anyway, a short video, a little bit of a story about, like I said, hubris, and an interesting start to the new cabin location for filming videos. But yeah, it's been an interesting year, let me put it that way. And I think, for most people out there, there would have been good and bad. Every year has that. We all have triumphs and tragedies, personally and obviously in the world around us. And, philosophically, it's nothing. I managed to get the cabin built. I'm very lucky to have it. I appreciate that. I'm overjoyed that I have it, and I'm really looking forward to making more videos in here and sharing them with you. And I'm just excited for the future. I think it's going to be really cool. This space is so much better for making videos in. I find it a little bit weird, to be honest, that we don't have the desk between us anymore. And I'm not quite sure if I'm going to film like this in the future, if this is the way I'm going to do things. I find it a little bit odd, but that's only because I'm used to the sort of news reporter desk type vibe. But we'll have to see how it goes in the future. I've got my Apple II GS there and my Amiga 1000 and this mystery machine behind me. And And I'm just really looking forward to, making videos on those. Over there behind you, there's a new area now where I can do repairs. I don't have to do anything on the dining table anymore. I'm still in the process of actually getting my workstation set up for work, my day job. I've got a Windows PC as well, which I play modern games on, things like Fallout, Civilization, things like that. And yeah, it's just a fantastic space. I don't know quite what to do yet with the work area over there, but it looks like I'm going to have to start making use of it pretty soon, because I may have to start making a video on repairing this machine. And I don't know what's actually wrong with it. I'm hoping it's just the power supply, and I hope it's a failure where something is just basically conking out. There's a capacitor in there that's leaking maybe, and just doesn't have enough juice anymore. It doesn't have enough capacitance to actually hold the power that you need to keep this machine running. The Commodore 64, the same thing. I've been thinking about getting a new power supply for a while now. I think I'll push that ahead. I'll get a new power supply for it, because I was using the original one, which was, it seemed to be perfectly fine. My bet actually is on the power switch. It's been terrible, very, very stiff. And I honestly think that's gone kaput. And hopefully, if I replace that, that'll be it really. But I do need to get it open and do a bit of diagnosing on it and see what's going on with it. Hopefully that will be in a future video. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. I'm going to go off and relax. Tomorrow, like I said, is New Year's Eve. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you come back for more in the future. I'm really looking forward to doing more videos, which will hopefully be a little bit more interesting than my broken machines in the future. And at some point, I hope to do a review and more of an in-depth dive into Wasteland, because that's something I'd like to do on the channel a bit more, actually look at software. I've got some really great games up here which I want to talk about with you. And that was one of the reasons why I got Wasteland. I didn't just buy it to play it, I bought it to talk about it with you as well. So that'll be cool in the future. Anyway, yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please click on the like button. And if you did like it and you are new to the channel and you're willing to come back and watch more in the future, please click on the subscribe button. And also please hit the bell, because then you'll get notified when I actually release new videos. And I hope you do like the video and you do subscribe and hit the bell and come back, because I think the year ahead is going to be really cool. And I hope to see you there as well. Anyway, until next year, take care and good night.